Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're investigating the frankly topsy-turvy world of American education reform. We're going to look at how, over the last quarter of a century, billions of dollars were spent to somehow make things worse. You see, there's a peculiar kind of logic that only the incredibly well-funded can afford, and we need to look closely at a question that no highly paid consultant seems to want to answer. If 25 years of federal mandates, billionaire philanthropy, standardized testing regimes, and all that shiny educational technology were actually working, well, why on earth do two entire generations now read worse than the one that came before them?
Let's just dive right into the numbers, because according to the 2024 Nations Report Card, reading scores are in an absolute freefall. They've hit their lowest point since the assessment began way back in 1992. Today, only 35% of graduating high school seniors read at a level associated with readiness for entry-level college coursework. 35%. And look, we can't just brush this off as some pandemic anomaly. The bottom of the score distribution had actually been collapsing for more than a decade prior to 2020.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the crime scene, the literacy freefall. We are essentially stepping into a massive educational crime scene here. Right now, a record share of fourth graders are scoring below the basic threshold. Now, what does that actually mean? It means they can't reliably infer why a character in a story did what she did. So these reforms, even on their own terms, haven't just underperformed, they have fundamentally failed. The initial stated goal of policies like No Child Left Behind was to lift the floor and close achievement gaps. But the reality? It's a decades-long structural collapse, completely masked by the comfortable fog of vague bureaucratic promises. This is literally the worst structural decline in 50 years, and vagueness is exactly the fog in which bad reform survives long enough to just be replaced by the next bad reform. Which leads us to ask, who ended up taking the blame for all this?
That brings us to Section 2, the scapegoat, blaming the people in the room.
For a quarter of a century, whenever the numbers came back looking terrible, the system did what it always does. It stripped educators of their professional autonomy, handed them highly scripted curricula, and blamed them for the poor outcomes. We tried to fix an entire system by constantly sanctioning the exact same workforce. We underpay and overwork. Right now, there is a staggering $30,000 pay gap between teachers and comparably educated adults in other fields. No wonder teachers are reporting burnout, depression, and job stress at multiples of the general working population. You simply do not professionalize a workforce by treating it as the point of failure in a system it didn't even design.
Section 3, the real culprits, politicians, plutocrats, and publishers.
If we clear the teacher's name, we have to investigate the true architects of this madness. Over the last 25 years, we can track a relentless churn of top-down policies that basically treated children like data points and classrooms like national pilot programs. It was a regime driven by three main groups: politicians imposing mandates, plutocrats funding massive unproven experiments, and publishers aggressively pushing the next untested product. In 2001, politicians gave us No Child Left Behind. By 2009, billionaire philanthropy pivoted from their failed small schools initiatives straight into funding teacher evaluations. The 2010s brought us the Common Core standards. And today, we're in the midst of a massive edtech software boom. So let's break down exactly what each of these factions did, starting with the politicians.
Looking first at the politicians, No Child Left Behind introduced a devastating phenomenon known as instructional triaging. The law made an entire profession answerable for outcomes while totally ignoring the outside conditions that produce those outcomes, things like poverty or massive class sizes. It attached the very survival of a school to a single number on a standardized test. As the old saying goes, they weighed the hog obsessively, but never once fed it.
This three-step triage process practically turned educators into test managers. Think about it. When a school is threatened with sanctions, they respond rationally. Step 1, they identify the bubble kids, the ones hovering right near the passing cutoff. Step 2, they divert all their instructional time and resources to nudging those specific kids over the finish line. And Step 3, the absolutely tragic result, the sheer neglect of the most disadvantaged students who are further from the cutoff. Evidence from at least one state showed that outcomes for those most vulnerable students actually deteriorated under this immense pressure.
Then we have the plutocrats. Wealthy philanthropists, most notably the Gates Foundation, decided to run massive, uncontrolled experiments on other people's children. Their goal was to completely fix education through huge financial grants. But when the Rand Corporation, a highly respected independent research organization, evaluated one of their largest teacher evaluation initiatives, their massive report categorized the outcomes across a range of measures as, quote,
Null to negative. Null to negative.
To really put that into perspective, the crucial point here is the staggering financial waste. We are talking about more than $500 million, $575 million to be exact, spent on that single intensive partnerships initiative. And it completely failed to achieve its goals, particularly for the low-income and minority students it was explicitly designed to help. When private entities get to run national pilot programs on public school kids and it fails, it's the students who pay the ultimate bill in lost instructional time. Meanwhile, the curriculum publishers and edtech companies reliably peddled their quick fixes with the regularity of a metronome. Glossy new binders arrived in schools promising miracles, often abandoning systematic, science-backed phonics for trendy methods that cognitive science had long ago discredited. Then came the edtech boom, adaptive software and digital licenses marketed as personalized learning. Yet a comprehensive 2009 U.S. Department of Education study of reading and math software found its overall effect on student achievement was exactly zero. Literally 0%.
Section 4. The weapon, instructional cannibalization.
So how is this crime actually committed inside the classroom? Well, when you impose rigid standards like the Common Core and you tie everything to high-stakes testing, the curriculum begins to eat itself. So what got starved out? To make room for endless test prep, schools crowded out untested subjects like social studies, science, and art. The crazy part is, those are the exact subjects that build the background knowledge you need to comprehend what you're reading. Crucially, they also starved oracy. Oracy is that rich, extended, back-and-forth dialogic talk between adults and kids. It's what builds vocabulary, but since you can't easily put a conversation on a standardized test, it was squeezed out. Without background knowledge and without vocabulary, a child's capacity to actually evaluate and reason through text simply withered away.
Because we spent 25 years teaching kids to bubble in an answer sheet just to comply with a pacing guide rather than teaching them to interrogate a claim or reason through a tough text, we are left with a terrifying reality. According to studies, a whopping 80% of students today cannot distinguish sponsored content from a real news article. Just 20% can tell the difference between a paid ad and actual journalism.
In fact, when the Stanford History Education Group tested nearly 8,000 students, ranging from middle school all the way up through college, on their ability to evaluate the credibility of information online, they summed up the results in one horrifying word: bleak. A follow-up study even found that more than half of high schoolers considered a grainy, totally unverified video to be strong evidence of a claimed act of voter fraud.
So where do we go from here? Section 5. The solution: fixing the architecture.
How do we escape this wonderland of corporate logic? How do we stop churning through unproven apps and punishing the people working on the front lines? We have to look past the marketing and focus on fixing the actual architecture of our schools. The answer isn't a shiny new app, and it's certainly not another multi-million-dollar grant from a billionaire. The real fix is the boring, unglamorous, science-backed reality: systematic phonics, vast amounts of vocabulary-building talk to restore that vital oracy, and giving teachers their professional autonomy back, coupled with compensation that treats them like the load-bearing walls of society that they actually are. Above all, we absolutely must stop trying to fix a relational, slow, and deeply human process using corporate key performance indicators. Education has never once been fixed by someone who made their fortune in a completely different industry, deciding they know better than the career educators actually in the room. We have to stop importing scalable corporate disruption into a fundamentally human enterprise.
Look, a citizenry that cannot discern propaganda isn't just an educational statistic. It is a manufactured civic vulnerability. And it was built one testing mandate and one grant cycle at a time. This leaves us with one vital question to ponder as we conclude this explainer. Are we going to keep treating children as data to be managed, or will we finally trust and empower the people actually in the room?